So I want to, well, let me start with you, actually. If I say to you, what is this election about in 2 weeks, what's your answer?
It's about a check on executive power. We need a check on Donald Trump, and it's about the economy. We need people who are working Americans to do better. They haven't gotten anything under Donald Trump.
How about, what's your answer to that?
Are we better off than we were 2 years ago? Is the country moving in the right direction from a job creation and an economic growth perspective? And are we willing to give Republicans a continued chance to govern out of the House, notwithstanding the fact that there are frustrations with the way that the president communicates?
Right. So that's a perfectly decent, but I can't find a 30-second ad being run on those issues. I mean, honestly, it seems to me an incredible condemnation of the Republican record that every ad is about, it's about the caravan, it's about MS-13, it's about the Democrats are going to let the mob get after you, and there's precious little you can find on anything having to do with the record of Republicans.
Look, I think that it's for whatever reason, the strategic decisions being made are we need to get our base out, when from my perspective is it would seem to me that the base in large measure should be happy with the types of policies that the president has been espousing, and in the districts that we need to keep, suburban Minneapolis, suburban California, we should be layering on top of that a more centrist message.
The reality is most Americans aren't happy, and that's why the president is doing this. It's out of weakness. If the president had a winning hand, if he really thought that Americans were doing better, he'd run on that. But he's stuck in the 40% in his polls, and so this is desperation. He's clinging to power. I think it's going to backfire because most Republicans are reasonable, like Ryan. I mean, they actually believe in evidence, reason. You can actually debate with Ryan. We do bills. We disagree. That's what most people believe in. This is not something that...
Rose just saying that because he'll win the debate again.
Well, but you two are both saying the same thing, which I think is wrong. You guys are both saying that you guys are both saying the strategic decision that's been made is incorrect. The strategic decision, which we all agree on, which is clear, is get the base riled up with really nasty stuff. I mean, really, honestly, the way, lying about their terrorists infiltrating the caravan, completely baseless stuff. They think that will work. You both don't think it does. But what if it does? What does it say?
The caveat here is that I believe the president in large measure is campaigning for the United States Senate, not for House races. And if you look in North Dakota, in Indiana, in Missouri, and a few others, Montana, they love him there.
But or at least he's what does that 50%. Say to you? They love the fact that he's lying and saying that there are Middle Eastern
terrorists. I'm not here to indict. Well, the voters of those states get to choose what they support and what they don't. But look, in my district, having the president in to campaign for me this year, if I were running, would not be a winning recipe.
Yeah, right.
And his tactics are not original. I mean, people lying to hold on to power is as old as politics itself.
Yeah, that's true.
And, at some point you have to believe in the common sense and decency of Americans, and eventually they'll get it right. And what we can't do is get distracted. Look, remember, he's at 45%. The majority of Americans don't believe in his tactics.
Well, what I thought was such a tell was this ridiculous thing. First of all, the lies have been sort of some have been really nasty. Some have been hilarious, like the idea that there's riots happening in California that just no one's seen. Oh yeah, there's the president of the United States just casually being like, yeah, the riots in California. No, obviously. But I thought the rolling out a fictitious middle class tax cut was such a tell, right? Because what that says to me is you don't trust the thing you passed. You guys passed it. You walked the plank for it. You voted for that bill.
I voted. We were on last week. We had a good conversation.
Yeah, right. So you voted for that bill. What does it say to you that he invents a new middle class tax cut, which is not happening, which is totally fictitious, 2 weeks before Election Day because he clearly thinks the first one didn't work?
I don't know what to make of the fictitious tax cut. I can't help you on that one.
Well, I mean, he knows.
Are you going to vote for the fictitious tax cut?
Well, if he had a tax cut initially to help working families, that's what a lot of us wanted. We wanted the earned income tax credit to be expanded. That's what Kamala Harris has proposed. But the president knows he didn't do that. And he did a tax cut for his donors. Now that it's election time, he thinks he can pull the wool over folks' eyes. And it's not going to work.
There's another theme that's been emerging here. This is the pre-existing condition issue. I want to play Rick Scott is now the latest. Republicans very much on the defensive about pre-existing conditions, largely because of a lawsuit that would end them if it was successful, and also the vote on Obamacare repeal. This is what Rick Scott had to say. Take a listen. This is Rick Scott. Ad says he support forcing insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions. Just full screen there. This has been a theme, Republicans trying to get right with the American people on this, even when they've supported things that would change protections for pre-existing conditions.
Correct. Well, correct in the sense that that's the campaign issue. I think I voted against the health care bill on the floor. The pre-existing conditions coverage, I think at this point in time, nobody can be against. I think that the question that's being litigated is whether those who voted to allow a state to waive that in certain circumstances, if there was a state stability fund set up in order to provide the alternative cover. If we're going to talk health care policy, we're going to end up getting in the weeds. That's what will ultimately get litigated. Very difficult to litigate healthcare policy in 30-second political commercials.
But Chris, this is what Democrats need to run on. Everyone,
they are,
and we shouldn't get distracted with the sidetrack that Trump is trying to do. He knows healthcare is a losing issue for him. He knows people's deductibles have gone up, premiums have gone up. They aren't getting coverage, and we're winning on the healthcare debate.
Let me bring up one more issue that no one is running on, but might be one of the most important in the world. Just because I have you both here, there are millions of people in Yemen who are facing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. We're talking about millions of children who are at risk of starvation because of the U.S. and Saudi-led war in Yemen. Mohammed bin Salman, who just apparently ordered the murder of a journalist, has also been running this. You have a bill to stop U.S. support for Yemen. Tell me about it.
Well, Chris, I appreciate your bringing it up. You're one of the only mainstream journalists covering the issue. Let me just put it in perspective. There are 12 million Yemenis who face the possibility of starvation. 800,000 people died in Rwanda. 100,000 died in Bosnia. The world's worst famine in West Bengal over the last 100 years was 3 million. Here you have 12 million, and the United States is supporting the Saudis in bombing those civilians and not allowing humanitarian aid. Regardless of the politics, we should demand a cessation to the violence and let aid get in there.
This doesn't strike me as a particularly partisan issue. Is that something that you could see yourself supporting, other Republicans supporting?
I could, and I would just add to that, there are a number of hotspots around the globe that, because of the way that campaigns are run now, we don't focus on, and we don't have the ability to lean in on them and inform our constituents on the types of things that we're working on. So I applaud your leadership.
And I like Ryan. Look, this is how politics used to be. Ryan and I disagree, but he believes in evidence, facts, and it's a shame that the president is distorting the campaign so you don't have this.
The president said he's going to leave punishment of the Saudi situation up to Congress. It strikes me that the lame duck session, I think there's probably, in a lame duck session, I think you can get 235, 240 votes to end the U.S.-backed war in Yemen. I hope so. Representatives Khanna and Ryan Costello, thank you both for being with me.